So Mark and Theo, you guys are part of the Dream Team sound team on Blade Runner 2049. Working on a sequel to a movie that is such a classic and was so innovative in so many different ways, including in its sound design. Was that intimidating for you or challenging? I mean, how did you, I guess, get into it?
I would say it was more inspirational than anything else, because one of our early tasks was to understand what made the first film so rich and interesting sonically, and then find a way to deconstruct it and make it our own, which is to say, we never wanted to imitate that film, but we wanted to honor it in the way it was so effective and sort of subversive in its use of sound.
Mm-hmm.
Theo.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was certainly a certain amount of, weight at the back of my mind of, this is a movie that me and all of my friends were deeply in love with for years. The original Blade Runner, probably, I could even go as far as to say, sort of inspired me to work in this field in the first place. So, yeah, there was this huge weight of responsibility, but that was lightened to some extent by the way that our director approached it. I mean, he was very clear that he was making a film that took place some 30 years on from the original, and therefore things had evolved technologically and stylistically. Therefore, he made sure that we knew we were never expected to be slavishly reproducing something from the original movie, or even providing a completely direct continuation. It was just a return to that universe. That was what he sought from us, was the ability to seed enough things that made us feel familiar with the Blade Runner universe. But when it came to specific technologies, the sounds of spinners and blasters and everything else, even the sort of advertising that you hear off screen, he was very much encouraging us to enter into the spirit, but to be, to have the creative free reign as well. And that really took the pressure off. I think as soon as he started hearing those ideas and going, yes, that has returned me to the Blade Runner universe, but it's an original thing. That was.
Mm-hmm. It is a uniquely different movie from the original. So I wonder, I mean, if you could point to maybe a couple of specific ways in which you made it your own.
I think what we did successfully in this analysis or deconstruction of the first Blade Runner was finding our way to immerse the audience in this kind of sonic landscape. If you go back and listen to the first film, you discover that every scene is permeated by these sort of sonic, almost musical atmospheres or textures, and they are really valuable mood creators, working in a way that maybe almost score might do. But Denis had this very prescient idea to see if sound design could sort of carry that heavy load. So Theo and I spent many months creating a pastiche of these kind of sonic textures, these musical compositions that weren't necessarily melody or rhythm, but sort of enveloped the audience in the world that is the sound of Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I mean, you bring up the music, and I was going to ask, because you both have a background in music. So, I mean, how does that, I guess, inform your sound design and sound editing work?
Well, Theo, you go first. You're very well known as a composer, so please take that.
Well, at the same time, I think all of us, I was surprised, not only certainly Mark and myself, but our mixing re-recordists, Doug Hemphill and Ron Bartlett, they're also accomplished musicians. It's surprising how many people working in sound at the top end have a background in music. I think it's all about orchestration, and that doesn't necessarily mean using an orchestra. It's really about the arrangement of sound. And sound can be either tonal or atonal. And I think, having an understanding of what the elements needed to create a satisfying sound is a lot of the same things that you need to know to create a satisfying chord. And beyond just satisfying, if you want something to instill fear in people as an engine passes, it's going to be a different type of chord to one which is meant to sound like, it's the good guy's vehicle. I think there's a lot of musicality that goes into every aspect of sound design, probably even down to the Foley. I think, everything, it helps certainly for myself and Mark kind of overseeing what goes into the sound, to have that musical oversight. I think, we are arranging, and we're in very much the same way that an orchestrator or a composer puts together different sounds from different instruments and times them and makes sure that the notes that they play go together well. I think that's exactly what we're doing. And strangely enough, nowadays, the technologies and the programs that you use to create these sounds and work on them, manipulate them and sequence them are basically identical to the tools that they're the same programs often as the tools that the composers are working on. So yeah, I think it was one of the things that really gave us an unusual musicality in the sound, the fact that all of us are musicians in one way or another.
I want to add, Theo, that when I design, I'm not using a different skill set than when I compose or write a song or a piece. And in fact, I think on maybe a more meta level, you and I were building sound in the same way we would build an entire song or a composition. We're very sensitive to the dynamics of the sound across time, not necessarily in the sort of granular view of a specific sound effect, but we were always very sensitive of how does the envelope of sound play over time. Just like when you build a song, you want to start strong, you're going to have a B section, you go to a chorus, you go to a bridge. We're building sound with a very specific envelope, much in the way that maybe an orchestral composer builds a classical piece with 3 or 4 movements. We think in much longer arcs, I would say, because we can bring those musical skills to bear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of sound in this movie. Talking to the mixers, they described it as sort of a orchestrated chaos, I think is what they called it. So, I mean, can you guys talk about how you, when you're taking all these different kinds of sounds and you're trying to, how you create a good, clean track out of that?
Boy, that's a whole another hour-long conversation, I'm afraid to say.
Although I have to say, I think a lot of what we were doing in that way was very more closely than I'm used to, guided by the director and our editor, Joe Walker. I think both of them were very clear on whose head we need to be in at any given time. And if you know whose head you're in, if we're following inside Ryan Gosling's head and we're responding to everything that he sees and feels, and everything that physically that passes him as he walks the street, then we always have a very clear perspective. And yes, your character can be walking through cacophony, but something about following those characters and their eyes very closely, I think, helped us a huge amount in knowing what sound to come to the foreground at any given time, and how to sequence things to put us inside a character's head. Yeah, I think that was an important.
I'll just make something up right now. I would call that method sound design. I think, if you study Stanislavski or who's the other, Strasberg, what we're trying to do is find the backstory, get inside the heads of the characters. And once you understand that, once you understand their motivations and the meanings of a scene, the mechanics become a little bit simpler. You have almost a roadmap. It's an emotional roadmap to guide you. So that's a very valuable technique for us.
I think also, just the style of this film in particular, we have these long evolving shots of an actor moving through a space, and we go up close to his face and look at his eyes. And this isn't just for Ryan Gosling's character, but for Deckard and many of the others. There is a pace and a sort of psychological examination going on in Denis' direction and in the camera work by Roger Deakins. I mean, there's something which really cued us in to do those kind of psychological method sound design, as you
I made that up.
What it felt like we were kind of putting ourselves in the shoe of the character, and then it all comes clear.
Well, he is somebody who in his movies uses sound very expressionistically, whether it's this or Prisoners or Sicario or Arrival. So, I mean, what was that collaboration like between you and the director?
Well, Very succinctly, that's a very insightful question, because the first direction we received from Denis was to, quote, compose with sound. Those were his exact words to us. And this sort of connects to an earlier statement I just made, which was that Theo and I wanted to design sound sort of across longer arcs of the film. We did not, Denis wanted us to work a lot less diegetically, which is a fancy academic term meaning sound for what you see, that's motivated by something you see on the screen. He wanted us to work much more impressionistically, more like a composer does, weaving sound across entire scenes or multiple scenes. And so in that regard, Theo and I worked a lot more like an impressionist painter. We were like a Jackson Pollock painting. We were lobbing, paint bombs at the film canvas and allowing our sound design to splash across vast expanses of that canvas. And that gave us this very musical approach that is much more sort of emotional and evocative, I think, than worrying about the sort of synchronicity of, well, do we have a sound for that thing we're looking at on camera?
Yeah, it's as if sound editing is often tasked with very short, like you're given words. And I felt like we were given whole sentences of that sequence where Kay walks from the orange desert of Las Vegas into the casino and meets Deckard for the first time. I forget how many minutes long that is, but 6 or 7 minutes of pure uninterrupted sound design, taking a character from one location to another. And that really allows us to create, yes, like not just a word or two here and there with the sound, but a whole sentence, a whole phrase. And I think that was one of the great things also, in Denis' style and in Joe Walker's cutting, that we were allowed
Sorry, I'm sorry, my phone rang. I turned it off.
Speaking of sound.
I'm sorry, Theo. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'd completed my phrase.
Okay. Then one more footnote to that notion. I love that idea, that sort of allusion to writing in paragraphs versus words. In many ways, what we do as sound designers or sound editors is very kind of granular and word-like. We're sort of detail-oriented. I liken that to coloring book work. It's the simplest form of what we do. You see something on screen and you color it in with your number 3 gunshot crayon. Denis allowed us to color way outside the lines. We created this very expressionistic painting of sound that was much more divorced from our traditional work of see a thing, hear a thing. In fact, at a screening that Theo and I went to, I was really thrilled to have an audience member come up to me and say, I heard things I didn't see. And I found that to be the ultimate compliment.
It's something that some directors might be scared of. They would see, they'd hear something that's not on screen and they're like, that's kind of going to get distracted. What is that? Why am I not, I'm hearing it and not seeing it. I think, part of it is that Blade Runner is such a rich and sort of densely textured universe that you expect to be able to hear the things that are flying above you and broadcasting an advert or whatever it is. But part of it is definitely Denis' insistence on an expressionistic and realistic use of sound. Yeah, he gave us an unusual carte blanche to invent outside of the frame of the picture that we're seeing.
Well, it certainly helps put you in that world and helps create that mood that you're going for.
Right.
So kudos for that. So you guys received an Oscar nomination for this movie. Theo, it's your first nomination. Mark, you are a previous Oscar winner for Mad Max Fury Road. Can you guys talk a little bit about what that recognition means for you?
Theo, you're up.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. It's just, it hasn't happened. Well, it's about to, I don't know. It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, I think like many sound editors and composers, I'm used to working in a tiny soundproof, lightless room. And it's nice to be reminded that there's an appreciative, to meet the members of the Academy and all of the people who sort of in their different roles. I was particularly excited to meet Daniel Kaluuya at the Oscar lunch, partly as he's in the film which I'm working on at the moment. But he was so so interested in sound and so interested in what it is that defines whether a film has good sound or not. So we had a good chinwag about that, and it's just nice to know. It's nice to sort of to have what you do in this sort of lightless cell of a room. Sort of, you realize that people are appreciating that it feeds into their art form. Yeah, but yeah, I'm a novice to this Oscar nomination stuff. You should ask Mark.
Well, one can never be an expert in this. It always comes as a surprise and a great thrill. I think this time around, what I'm most pleased about is that, it's important that this is a recognition by our peers. So I get particular personal satisfaction that the best and the brightest in the world, the members of the sound branch of the Academy, found value in our film. Why I find that particularly thrilling is that often these awards seem to recognize the loudest movies or the movies with the most sound. And I think this is a great acknowledgement by the best in the world that there's a place for really nuanced sound. I mean, Blade Runner we have our loud moments, no doubt, but we contrast them greatly with deep quiet and subtlety that I think is hard to find and often maybe hard to recognize. So I'm really tickled by this nomination because it's acknowledgement that great and nuanced and clever sound work is valuable.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much, and congratulations on the movie. It's really fantastic, and congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Really good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you as well.